Hey everyone, welcome back to Big Strong Book. I'm Reed, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Blackest Heart, Book 2 in Brian Lee Durfee's The Five Warrior Angels trilogy. So this book is just about as thick as they come, just as epic as the first book, just as intense, just as unrelenting in its pacing. And yeah, I think this is a book that gets a 5 out of 5 for me. It's often tough, I find, to review the second books in trilogies because they are sandwiched between the introduction of the world and the end of the story. And the ending of the story is usually the most exciting part, and same with the introduction, because as you're getting to know the characters, you're getting to really get a feel for the world. And then the second book, for I guess lack of a better word, is more so a bridge between that introduction and that ending. Very rarely is the second book in a trilogy allowed to really stand out on its own. I mean, the best example I can think of a second in a trilogy standing out doesn't even come from books. I think of The Empire Strikes Back in Star Wars. That is something that is able to expand the stakes and like really move the story in a great direction, while being really solid just on its own. And I know as I'm continuing through the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn read along on the channel, and as we're going through Stone of Farewell right now, I know I'm not the biggest fan of Stone of Farewell, at least in terms of the context of the greater series, because Stone of Farewell just feels as if the story is moving along, but that story encapsulated within that single volume doesn't build to something super great or climactic, and that is what I wanted to see in that. This book does. My God, does it build to a great climax, and one that had me questioning if a very significant character would die and leave the whole plot of the series in flux. I won't say whether or not that character does die, but yeah, so this book picks up straight after the end of The Forgetting Moon. And I'll try to stay as spoiler-free as possible with this. I know it'll be difficult to not mention events that happened in the first book, but I'll try my best to keep this as general for even if you're watching this review and having never read the first book, or you know, having never read anything in this series, just to make sure that this review stands on its own. And doesn't, give away things. But I will say this book centers greatly around the idea of prophecy. Prophecy was a big part of the first book, but this book takes it and deepens it and convolutes it at the same time. Whereas there were many things in the first book that seemed kind of cut and dry with the prophecies, to the point where there's a part in The Forgetting Moon in book 1 where a few characters are meeting together and they discuss this significant prophecy that is very intrinsic to the world of the Five Isles, the world in which this story takes place. And the characters themselves discuss it and are able to break down every part of the prophecy, and they essentially say this person is this, correlates to this in the prophecy, this person that we know is this person in the prophecy. And you think it's set up that way, but of course it isn't. This book throws so many, and I will, there are things that happen in this book that negate the theories that the characters have, that I'll just say permanently negate them. So and it becomes clear as the story goes that these prophetical theories that the characters have, they just simply can't be true. And there are red herrings that come about within this book. You know, there's the prophecy of the slave. Who is the slave? Is it, this is maybe minor spoilers for just introducing this into the story, but, you know, this is very minor spoilers, but is the slave the POV character Nail that we have followed from the beginning? Is the slave Lindholf? Is it him? Both of them have, you know, are showing the similar signs of the prophecy. And I like Durfee keeping us unawares. I mean, granted, I've only read both book 1 and book 2. I've read these through the past couple of weeks. I've read them through one time. I should note, I don't take notes when I read. That's just not something I like to do, especially if it's the first time that I'm reading through really any book, but in particular an epic fantasy series. Granted, I mean, you know, series like the Malazan Book of the Fallen, that's a series where it kind of behooves the reader to take notes. But something like this, I know that the questions, you know, there is an ending. There's the Lonesome Crown, book 3. There will be answers, you know. Then all the red herrings, all of the misdirections and the expectations and the subversion, all of that will come to a head in the next book. And then in rereading this, which I know, I mean, assuming the last book sticks the landing, which from what I've read in reviews online, the third book certainly does stick the landing, which is great to hear. You know, you don't, I mean, I know that there are trilogies and series out there where you get into it and all of the books leading up to the finale are great, and then the finale just ruins it for everybody. So it's great to hear that the Lonesome Crown, which is book 3 in this trilogy, has gotten such a positive response. So that makes me feel a little more, that makes me definitely feel optimistic going into it. But I like the feeling of unknown. Like, I will be honest with all of you here. I think I might have some idea of where this story is going, but because of all of these possibilities, you know, character X, Y, and Z could all fit one part of the prophecy. There's almost like endless amounts of combinations because I mean, this whole thing, the whole big prophecy is, who are the 5 warrior angels? Who will they be? We just know them from the general terms that describe them: the gladiator, the assassin, the thief, the princess, and the slave. There's a few characters that fit the mold at the beginning of this book for the gladiator. There's definitely a few that fit the mold for the assassin. The thief, there's like 3 characters that fit that mold. The princess, there's another like 3, I mean 2 for sure. One that I'm pretty sure could also, you know, it's kind of like in A Song of Ice and Fire when so many people have their theories for who the chosen one is, for who is Azor Ahai. There's all of the, you know, nitpicking points. I always loved the theory in A Song of Ice and Fire that Littlefinger was actually Azor Ahai. Unfortunately, that didn't come to fruition within the show. It would have been great to see that. But with this, I feel like it's going to be that kind of a reveal of all the many aspects of these prophecies. And I'll kind of sit back and I'll be like, whoa, I didn't see that coming, but now that it's kind of brought forward within the story, it makes so much sense. But again, some, if not all of these prophecies may be completely meaningless, and I'm okay with that too, because there's a conversation that a couple characters have in the middle of this book. It's about 600 pages in, so slightly over halfway through, where a couple of them are talking about, you know, they've been on a quest to find, you know, to find some of these prophesied and mythical items. And they're just having a conversation, and they're like, do these prophecies matter? You know, am I this person in the prophecy? Are you this person? And they kind of say, you know, they kind of both agree, it doesn't matter. We're doing what we think is right given this broader conflict, and so that's all that should matter. It shouldn't matter whether or not you are the slave or I am the thief or whoever in this prophecy. That shouldn't matter. I know I mentioned in my review of The Forgetting Moon that that book deftly blended together items of, you know, it deftly blended together items, or, you know, not items, but tropes and characteristics of epic fantasy, and I mean traditional epic. It's reaching back to Tolkien with the quest and all of that, to the great aspects of just brutal grimdark fantasy. Again, and this book extends that synthesis even further. In this book, as a matter of fact, we actually get a quest. We, you know, it's very on the nose, but it works. You know, there's a company of 9, a fellowship of 9 individuals, 9 characters that set out on this grand quest to retrieve this items. But there are so many perils that they face. There are so many twists and turns. They lose a few of them along the way, very tragically. And again, and then there are other parts of these prophecies as they go into these other parts of the world, because there are some cultures in these far northern and distant lands, the Ogles in particular is what I'm referring to, where they have their own dark prophecies of these demon lords and their dragons, and a lot of them think that they see a dragon or see these knights with kind of skull faces, but then other characters don't see them. So it's, you know, are they real? Are they not real? You get an answer by the end of the book, though. And yeah, again, I have no idea. I have ideas for, you know, what we will see. In the last book, we will probably see that fiery absolution that has been prophesied, and that because this whole thing is building up to what should be built up to an epic fantasy, right? A huge earth-shattering cataclysm, conflict, battle. And from the reviews that I have read of The Lonesome Crown, the spoiler-free reviews, because I don't want anything to be spoiled for me about this story, but from what I've read, the final battle, so to speak, in the last book is like 400 pages long. You know, 40% of the book. I'm all here for that, so yeah, I can't wait for it. But again, this book, and I believe I've mentioned this already, but it's just the pacing of this. This is a big book. This book is nearly 1,000 pages long. But yet, you know, in most of the time with these epic fantasy books, it might take a little bit longer amount of time to read just 100 pages. This book, you can get through 100 pages in an hour easy. This book flies by. It took me a week to read this. I probably could have read it at a faster pace if I had wanted to. And yeah, it was just so good. And I can't wait to see how this will all come to a conclusion already. It's crazy that I'm gonna get to the end already, because it feels like this is something that arguably could have been many more books, but I'm excited to see how it all wraps up. So, The Blackest Heart, Book 2 of the 5 Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee, gets my highest recommendation and a perfect 5 out of 5 for me. So, let me know what you guys think of The Blackest Heart, of this trilogy as a whole, and as always, I will see you guys next time.